The Australian share market is tipped to dive as the threat of a US recession grows.
The Trump tariffs sent a huge shockwave through global markets.
We are seeing very substantial volatility now in global stock markets and in our own markets as well. Today in Australia, the market lost about 4% of value. On Friday, the US about 6%. There's even a more than even money expectation in the markets, more than 50% expectation in the markets that the next Reserve Bank interest rate cut in May might be as big as 50 basis points. And so the Australian dollar is reflecting that.
Week 2 of the election campaign has started with a grim backdrop of continuing fallout from Donald Trump's tariff war on the world, including an early $85 billion plunge on the local share market. But even without that, it felt like the Coalition's election campaign was in a freefall of its own.
We've made a mistake in relation to this policy, Sarah, and I think it's important that we say that and recognise it. And we apologise for that, and we've dealt with it.
How are you, Mark? Good. How are you? I'm doing well.
Mistakes, unfortunate incidents and memorable images happen in election campaigns, but in the last few days, not only has the Coalition had to dump a policy on working from home that had gone down like a lead balloon with voters, particularly women, it had to walk back another policy proposal to sack 41,000 public servants. That raised questions about its claimed budget savings. And it has also had to dump one candidate over unfortunate remarks about women in the military, and faced questions about another who has claimed she is a renter but who has now been revealed to own 2 properties.
What's the national unemployment rate?
National unemployment rate at the moment is, I think it's 5.4. Sorry, I'm not sure what it is.
It's hard to forget how the 2022 campaign began. Anthony Albanese's lapse on the first day on the trail was seen as delivering a staggering blow to Labor's campaign. But as week 2 of the 2025 campaign begins, the federal opposition is facing problems a little more serious than a simple senior moment about a number. In fact, the problems conjure up older campaign disasters.
Mr Howard was unable to immediately deny accusations from Treasurer Paul Keating yesterday that Mr Howard had made a simple mistake in using the same set of figures twice in his tax policy calculations.
In 1987, John Howard's campaign to oust the Hawke government all but imploded when the Coalition had to admit there was a giant black hole in its policy costings. These days, people don't seem quite as fussed about policy costings. In fact, we haven't even seen that many policies. But a second policy shift today, walking back an earlier Trump-flavoured pledge to sack 41,000 public servants, involves the biggest on-budget savings initiative regularly mentioned by the Coalition.
It's also the public service job cuts, initially targeting 41,000 jobs. Now you're walking back from that. How will you find the billions you need for your Medicare plan?
Well, Sarah, that was always the plan, that there would be natural attrition and a hiring freeze, and that achieved over
Hey, Peter,
a 4 or 5 year
I'm struggling
period,
to
the number
keep up.
that we
You're
needed.
saying
So
this
there's
was
no
always the plan, but
Yeah.
it wasn't the plan. You wanted to cut back 41 jobs. You wanted to introduce working from home. You've walked back from both of those. How can they have both always been the plan? It doesn't make sense.
Well, Sarah, you asked a question about the costing. There's no change to the costing at all, because the original plan of the natural attrition and the freezing was what we'd always had.
But the natural attrition argument didn't quite stack up against the tone of what the opposition leader said less than 2 weeks ago.
We'll reverse Labor's increase of 41,000 Canberra public servants because it will save about $7 billion a year.
The Coalition had pitched its public service cuts as a classic Canberra bashing exercise, but it started to run into trouble when Labor pointed out that the majority of public servants work in towns across Australia, not Canberra. Equally and more politically damaging was the Coalition's announcement last month that all federal public servants would be forced to work from the office 5 days a week.
Labor has made work from home a right for the individual, not an arrangement that works for all. And this is unsustainable.
Pollsters and MPs reported the policy was a particular disaster in outer suburban areas where families face big commutes. The first back down on the weekend suggested the cuts would only apply in Canberra. While Peter Dutton and his colleagues tried to explain the policy backdowns today, the government was enjoying itself.
It's great to be back here at Sunshine Station.
The Prime Minister has been facing accusations over the past week that he was avoiding being seen with Victorian Premier Jacinta Allan because of the deep unpopularity of the state Labor government. With the Coalition in such a world of pain, that didn't seem to be such a problem today.
My government will partner with the Allen government to deliver for Victorians. That's what this $7 billion commitment is about.
A bit like the chaos gripping world markets, the sense of chaos in the Coalition campaign meant announcements from Labor on big subsidies for households on batteries and the Coalition on planned cuts to international student numbers were, at least for now, relegated to second place. One small piece of good news is that, for now, the Treasury is forecasting that the impact on Australia's growth and inflation rates of the Trump tariffs will be small, though they will hit trade-exposed industries like agriculture and mining hard.
Treasury is not expecting the Australian economy to go backwards. In fact, what we are forecasting, or what they are forecasting in our economy, is for growth to continue to gather pace, but it acknowledges that there are now much more substantial risks to that outlook.
Angus Taylor is the Shadow Treasurer. He joined me earlier. Angus Taylor, welcome to 7:30.
Good to be with you, Sarah.
Given the world economic fallout from the tariffs, do you now anticipate cuts from the Reserve Bank?
Well, I don't get into predicting what the Reserve Bank does, Sarah, but I will say we are living in a deeply uncertain time. I think there's huge challenges for the economy globally and locally. I have asked the Treasury Secretary for daily updates to the Coalition because of the gravity of the crisis we're facing. I think there's a real prospect of a broader global trade war. And what we know is that this will, in combination, put downward pressure on the growth of the economy, which has been sluggish at the best of times, 7 consecutive quarters of negative GDP per capita, and also has the prospect of being inflationary, particularly because of our low exchange rate. And this is a very dangerous time for our economy, for Australians, self-managed retirees, pensioners, people who have been saving a nest egg for their retirement. It's clear that they've seen a free fall in their asset values, and young Australians who are saving up for a home, for instance, a very tough time for them. We need strong economic management at this time, a steady hand. That is the key as we look forward.
Now, after initially looking like he was showing you a path to victory, has the madness of Donald Trump now damaged your chances of winning?
Well, I don't get into commentary on other leaders around the world. I'll focus on what's good for Australia and what's right for Australia. We have long survived and done well on getting access to markets around the world, and we want to continue to do that. And so we obviously think that what's going on in the US right now is bad for Australia, and we'll fight against it, and we should. Peter Dutton has said he will travel to the US if we win the election immediately to have face-to-face meetings, to say to the Americans, this is not good for one of their most trusted allies. We've fought with them in every war, and we do expect better, and we can do better.
Now, I want to talk about your working from home backflip. This move has the whiff of desperation about it. Do you accept now that the policies were ill-considered from the beginning?
Well, we've obviously said they were wrong, and we've said we've apologised for them, and we'll go forward in a different direction. But the one thing
could they have cost you the election had you left them in place?
You know, you're the commentator, Sarah. But what I will say is that making sure that government is the right size in this country is hard work, and this government has absolutely failed to do that. It's grown government spending to a level that we haven't seen in 40 years as a percent of GDP. And we know that that's inflationary. It always has been, always will be. The result is we've seen a collapse in our standard of living. Prices have gone up much faster than incomes.
Why don't we stay with the matter at hand, Angus Taylor? Are voters going to mark down an alternative government that starts dumping key policies at this stage in the campaign? Well,
we haven't dumped the key policy of making sure government is the right size in this country. And we've seen a growth of 41,000 in the public service. And we want to see a better public service, not a bigger public service. We want public servants in this country being able to be their best, to serving their country the best way they possibly can. And that doesn't necessarily mean making for a bigger public service. So that's our focus. We accept now that work from home was the wrong policy. I will say, though, Sarah, that it was also a very misleading campaign from Labor that has not helped the situation, because they were trying to claim that we were pursuing this across the entire economy. That was not the case. And sadly, that kind of misleading campaign, that scare campaign from Labor, is what we are seeing elsewhere and will continue to see.
Nonetheless, you're the ones that decided to drop the policy. Had it become obvious to you that many working mothers, reliant now on the flexibility of working from home, had decided to vote against you and against Peter Dutton as Prime Minister on this issue alone?
Well, again, I'm not going to get into the commentary on polls and that sort of thing, but what I will say is I think we accept that workplaces need flexibility. That flexibility is important. Now, one of the challenges in making sure that we get enough people going to work, to the workplace, is making sure young Australians actually get the mentoring that they deserve. And we're going to have to find the right and appropriate way to do that. But what we want to see...
Does that mean that you leave open the possibility of reintroducing a similar policy were you to come into government?
Not at all. You see, at the end of the day, what you've got to make sure, Sarah, is that you get the balance right between flexibility in the workplace and accountability for outcomes, including mentoring of young people and, of course, in the public service, outcomes for Australians.
Well, let's talk about the size of the public service, because there's been a lot of confusion about how you're going to get to your target position, your desired public service. You're saying you're going to cut 41,000 jobs, not by sacking people, but through natural attritions and not by attacking frontline services. So help us, what is a frontline position according to you?
Well, if someone's serving veterans, for instance, that's a frontline position. Or if someone's working in the military, that's a frontline position, Sarah.
Does that mean that a worker can't be doing a useful job if they're not sitting in a booth or on the phone dealing directly with the public? That is the only threshold for a valuable job in the public service?
Not at all, Sarah, and we haven't said that. What we've said is we need to get the public service to the size it was when we were last in government. We need to repair budget deficits that are costing Australians dearly. We're going to see around $125,000 of debt for every family and interest payments for every family in Australia in the next couple of years. And so a responsible government would be doing everything it can to make sure the public service isn't bigger but is better. Look, there's incredible people working in our public service. I want to enable them to be their very, very best.
So just quickly on the Federal Health and Education departments, Peter Dutton questioned the value of those departments. What is your policy on cuts to the Federal Health Department and the Federal Education Department? What target do you have for those two? Well,
it's exactly the same as across the entire public service, which is we'll allow natural attrition to get back to the size we were at when we were last in government. There will be hiring freezes, and we'll be focusing on making sure that Australians working in our public service are able to do their very best every single day. And I know the vast majority of public servants want to do exactly that, Sarah.
Angus Taylor, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Good to be with you.